Okay, we'll go ahead and call the Wood County Executive Committee meeting to order. At this point, I will open up the 2014 Wood County budget hearing, and I would call on Mike Martin to present the proposal to us. Mike?
Good morning, everyone. The 2014 budget, each year when we get started with a governmental budget, as opposed to someone that's in private business or the corporate world, instead of starting with expenditures and setting your prices of what you're selling accordingly, we start the other way. We have to determine how much available resources do we have in revenues, and then we have to scale our budget to meet that. Because on the revenue side, we have, it turns out, very little flexibility as far as generating revenue. But each year when you look at these, at this pie chart, it's going to be quite similar. This is 2013's revised budget. And people that look at governments might think, well, property taxes is one of your main revenue sources. And it turns out at Wood County, it's less than a quarter of the revenue that we generate. And each year, the other big portions of the revenue are public charges, which a lot of that is charges as far as the Parks Department, also charges for the nursing home falls into that. And then another big portion is the intergovernmental, that's your federal and state aid. And Human Services Department dominates that area as far as that portion. But as far as the 2014, when you overlay that over the top of 2013, you don't see very many significant changes. Our budget went down approximately $1.3 million from 2013 to 2014. But a lot of that is made up as far as the fund balance applied. In 2013, that fund balance applied, the $5.3 million, a lot of that was in Edgewater's Capital Projects Fund. We borrowed the money late in 2012, and then most of it was appropriated into 2013. And when we go into 2014, that fund balance applied number drops significantly, because there's only about $800,000 money of that left to complete the project in 2014. And expenditures, we can break down expenditures in two different ways. One, as far as what's the purpose of that expenditure, what does it go towards, what's its mission? And the biggest portion of what Wood County does is in the Health and Human Services category. And the Human Services Department is the biggest portion of that category. It makes up about 40% of the total section. But also in that area is Edgewater Nursing Home and the Health Department. Veterans is in there. But Human Services makes up the large portion. Again, the budget went down by $1.3 million in the expenditure side also. But most of that is in the capital outlay section. You'll see that capital outlay in 2013 was a little over $6 million, and it dropped by about $1.4 million. So everything else other than capital outlay was very close to 2013. Individually, there could be some changes within that, but broad categories, not much change from 13 to 14, other than in capital outlay. The other way to break down expenditures is, how do we deliver those services? Is it through wages and fringes? Do we contract it out? Do we spend it on supplies and other types of items? Do we have contributions to other entities? So when you look at Wood County's pie chart as far as how we deliver those services, wages and fringes is going to be our biggest portion of our overall budget. And that's the way it is each and every year. It's been hovering right around between 40 and 45% for quite a few years. But other big areas are in supplies, but that area is inflated quite a bit because that happens to be where our employee health claims are. So that's what a big portion of that is. When you take a look at 2014 2014 overlaid on top of 2013. Once again, the big change is going to be in capital outlay. The other categories didn't change significantly at all. Wages and fringes, we had a decrease, and I'll be in a later slide, but we had a decrease in our total FTEs, our full-time equivalent positions. A lot of that was contracting out a service that was planned on being at Norwood through wages and fringes. It didn't really get off the ground in 2013, and as we did the 2014 budget, it was deemed that it would be better to contract out those services. Our tax rate is figured based on our levy divided by our equalized value. So our tax rate will get affected by what happens in our equalized value. Before this year, you can see that we had 3 out of the last 4 years, 2010, 11, 12, and 13, 3 of those 4 years we had a drop in our equalized value. And that reflected the economy, real estate values. We did have an increase of $9 million in 2014, which helped our rates somewhat, but it was only a 0.2% increase. So equalized value was essentially flat as far as we were figuring our tax rate. Here's about a 15-year history of our tax rates. In looking at our tax rates, you can see what's happened in history as far as what's happened in our tax rates. In 2004, the tax rate dropped about 88 cents, from $5.71 to $4.83. And that's when the county implemented the half a percent county sales tax. And we adopted an ordinance at that time saying that it had to go, at least 50% of it had to go for direct property tax relief. And so our tax rate dropped dramatically when we implemented that. There's a little increase in 2006, and you think back, that's when Wood County took on shared dispatch. And so we were allowed to increase our rate, and then Marshfield and Rapids would have decreased their rates because those costs were transferred to Wood County. But for the last 6 years, our tax rate has been essentially the same, $4.69 to $4.70 per thousand. And for the last 3 years, it's been exactly the same. We do have another different element of our tax rate, and that's the library aid, the county aid for libraries. And that's assessed to those communities that don't operate their own library. The communities that have a library can exempt themselves from that tax. Here's just a graphical presentation of our tax rates over many years. And you can see the steep decrease in 2004 as far as the sales tax, a little blip up for shared dispatch, but then a decrease when they put in levy limits. That actually decreased our tax rate because what we had to do with the drop in equalized value, that would cause our tax rates to go down. No, actually the opposite. If the equalized value went down, it would cause our rates to go up. But in those years, we had a slight decrease in our tax rate. And then you can say for the last 6 years, it's been flat. This is something that I kind of sensed as far as our share of the total tax bill. I can see by just looking at the newspaper that the school districts, the cities, the villages, the towns, in a few cases, their rates have gone up over the last few years. And with our rates staying flat, what it's caused is of a taxpayer in Wood County, when they get their total tax bill, Wood County's share of that tax bill has dropped fairly significantly from a peak of about 20 or 21% to down to now 18.5 or 17%. So as our tax rate stays the same and tax rates of our partners tend to go up a little bit, our share of the total tax bill will go down. And I thought that was interesting.
Marshall would be that top line there.
Yeah.
Mr. Wagner, Mr. Fire, Mr. Handler, Marshall's that top line.
Hey, what's your point?
Just wanted to let you make that in full disclosure.
What do you do sales next?
You're doing a good job here.
There's no love in this
Yeah,
room.
we're not afraid to move forward. Oops.
This is just a 5-year presentation of our total budgeted sources and uses. And the reason I put this up is just to show a trend that our overall budget, if our tax rates stayed the same, even our overall budget hasn't changed very significantly. But the line I'm going to focus on as far as the next few slides is this total general revenue line. When a department submits their budget to oversight committees, it'll usually be presented as far as total expenditures, less program revenues, and then net levy subsidy. But that term levy subsidy for a department is a little bit, or it's not completely accurate, because there's more in that subsidy than just property taxes. Property taxes make up the largest share of it, but there's other sources of revenue in there. Sales tax being one, interest on investments being another, and use of cash reserves is another source of money. So I decided to present as far as each of our large departments, how do they share in that levy subsidy? And here's 2013. And you can see that it's the largest portions of the levy subsidies are in human services and sheriff. But the key thing there is that in human services, that's still not a really big percentage of their total budget. I can't remember exactly what their percentage share is, but the dollar amount is the same as the sheriff for percentage of budget, because the sheriff doesn't really generate much in their own program revenues. I mean, when there's traffic tickets or whatever, those revenues don't show up in the sheriff's budget. They're in the court system budget as far as fines and forfeitures. But when you look at 2014 overlaid on top of that, there really hasn't been much of a change in that either. What did change just a slight amount was the levy subsidy for Edgewater. And that went up a little bit just because I think we took a more realistic look as far as how much of their operation gets funded by their charges. And with the realistic look at their bed days, the committee and their oversight committee determined that levy should be increased to reflect reality. So that increased slightly, but a lot of the others stayed very much the same. When you hear budget terminology, a lot of times you'll hear the word contingency. And sometimes that's confused with cash reserves or working capital. We have an annual contingency of $450,000 to take care of any budget needs that come up after the budget is adopted. But cash reserves fits a different purpose. We need to maintain a certain level of cash reserves so that we can pay our bills as they come due as we're waiting for revenue. A lot of our revenues are either on a reimbursement basis, meaning that we have to incur the expenditures up front and then we'll get it later on, so we have to have cash available to pay those. And then some of ours, like shared revenues, we get approximately 20% of it early in the year, but 80% of it doesn't happen until this month, in November. So that general revenue source, it just isn't there for the majority of the year. So what we try to do is we try to maintain a certain percentage. And what I've done here is I've presented two things. One, the dark bar represents 15% of the base that we want to cover with that working capital. Base meaning what kind of budgets, what expenditures are we going to cover with those cash reserves. And then the light blue line is the target. That's the 15%. So you'll see that in 2013, we budgeted more than our target because we just had a surplus left over from 2012 that wasn't needed in 2013. But in 2014, we're just a little bit above our target. We're at 15.25 as far as our budgeted cash reserves, and the target, the budget being, the target being 15%. And here's just a graphical presentation as far as where our budgeted cash reserves have been. And you see that through a number of years, we were below that 15% target line. But then in the last couple of years, we've been able to exceed that 15% target. I put this slide in this year to give a little bit of history also as far as what's happened with wages and fringes. You can see that there was a kind of a steady increase for a number of years, but then in 2011 and 12, we had significant decreases in our wages and fringes. And they can be, the one that happened between 2010 and 2011 had to do a lot with closing group homes. We cut our FTEs in those years fairly substantially. And in 2012, it decreased for also a decrease in FTEs, but also that's when the employees started paying half of their retirement. And so that was a significant decrease in our total wages and fringes. In the last 2 years, we've seen a slight increase. And some of that has to do with the wage study. And then here's just a 5-year presentation of what's happened in our FTEs. You can see that from 2008, we had 713 full-time equivalents, and for the 2014 budget, we've got 606. So FTEs have dropped by over 100 positions. We had a net decrease in 2014 budget of 3.5, and that was made up of a couple of increases. I think Branch 1 had a new position. I think Human Services had a partial position. Sheriff had one. But we contracted out, like I mentioned earlier, when we contracted out that crisis stabilization unit for 2014 compared to 2013, that decreased the FTEs by, I think, 4.5 or 5 positions. And this is just a breakdown of FTEs by category. And you can see that the Health and Human Services area, again, not just Human Services in there, but Health Department, Edgewater are in there. They dominate that area, but you can see that there's been a fairly significant decrease in FTEs over the last few years. The other positions as far as public safety, again, that's made up of sheriff, dispatch, and emergency management. They've held pretty steady, as a lot of the other categories have too. So when we look at decreases in the last few years as far as total county, a good share of that has happened in the Health and Human Services area. I'll take any questions or maybe that. Ms. Reagan.
Mike, I was looking at the numbers you had on the capital outlay and the decrease. That was, if I'm understanding that correctly, that was all on Edgewater pretty much, right?
Yes.
And the money actually was from the loan proceeds, and it was carried over from one year to the next, and that's where you had but you counted that as a fund balance applied, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but it was actually loan proceeds money.
Yes. It was loan proceeds in 2012, but then it became the use of fund balance in 2013. We borrowed the money in 2012, and then we had it still sitting in reserves.
Yeah, but it was restricted funds.
For that purpose, yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Were there any other questions for Mike while he's still here with us? A couple things to note that Mike didn't bring up that I do. The library rate, those budget requests come from the library board, and in the past it's been a 75%. When we talk about 75%, that's what the people that don't have libraries reimburse the people that do have libraries. So we were always paying at a 75% payback to those libraries. So actually the cities are copping about 25% of the expense, for those of us that don't have libraries. This year, the library board asked to go up to 77%. It should be noted that the state law mandates 70%, but we've been working gradually towards reimbursing the towns and the village's fair share. So that's one of the items. The cash reserves, the 15% level not only keeps us in good stead with the bond raters, it also keeps us able to pay the bills. And like Mike mentioned, when we talk about shared revenue, that's a big chunk of money. So once November hits, Karen, the treasurer downstairs, she starts looking at the balance pretty close to make sure that we can still pay our bills until that shared revenue check comes in. 15% seems to be right where we should be, and that 15% was recommended to us by our financial advisors, Springstead, a number of years ago for bond rating and stuff. A couple of new items, or a couple of items where we did increase. Mike mentioned the Edgewater snow removal budget. I guess all I have to say is, look outside. It's getting bad again. I don't think the guys were out yesterday. I don't believe they were out yesterday. Maybe up on the north end a little bit, but all you have to do is look at Marathon County, and winter is starting early this year. And also, not a big amount, but the economic development grants that we're doing this year. I think it's $32,500 for each of for both the Reggie Group and for the Marshfield Economic Development Board. Both of those representatives are here. Gus Mancuso and Jason Angel are here, so if there's any questions about that, I'm sure they would be willing to answer any of those questions, but that is in this budget as well. Are there any other questions? Okay, before we close the public hearing, I want to take a moment to thank everyone involved in bringing the 2014 budget to this point. Once that parameter letter goes out, department heads and their staffs work hard to prioritize and fund their programs. When the executive committee meets for the budget hearings, we know the oversight committees have gone over their respective departments' requests with a fine-tooth comb. Indeed, it's scheduling entire meetings just to go over those budgets to review them. Once turned in, our finance department goes through them once again and has the daunting task of putting all the numbers into a simplified language that we, the executive committee, and the county board can understand. Our finance director, Mike Martin, our former deputy finance director, Shelley Barton, and our secretary, Bonnie Newber, have done this for many years, and they do it exceedingly well every year, and they get better and better at it. We always want to make sure that we're up front with the county board. Last month on the desk, you received the narrative that goes in the clerk's copy of the budget for public review. That has a wealth of information that I hope you guys took the time to read that. It has been noted in the presentation that we are recommending keeping the tax rate the same for a number of years, while in the same vein staying well below our allowable levy. Yes, it's true we could raise the levy to an allowable amount, which equates to about a 13-cent per thousand increase. If there's one thing that sticks out in my mind after this process, and Mr. Clendenny and I talked about this briefly before the meeting, and this I know is shared by others on the committee, is the fact that the state levy limitations need to take into account the unused portion of that levy and allow that unused portion to carry forward and not sunset. To tax just to tax is foolhardy, but if there's ever a time where we want to come back and use that, we should be able to have that opportunity. So I look forward to seeing something come out of judicial legislative, and if there's anything the executive committee can do to spearhead that, we'd be happy to work with you, Bill. Are there any other comments of the committee? Lance, Hilly, Donna, Mr. Hendler? Any other questions or comments? Okay. Then the 2014 budget hearing is now closed. The executive,
We have to pass the resolutions.
the budget hearing is closed. The executive committee is coming. Thank you, Don. The executive committee is not adjourned. Sometimes I wonder who runs it. I have two resolutions that need to be acted on by the executive committee. One is for the levy, and the other one is to adopt the 2014 budget. A motion to approve those and send them to county board for their consideration is made by Supervisor Hendler, seconded by Supervisor Henkel. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. A motion to adjourn would be in order, and I have one by Plimmel, seconded by Henkel. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. 25 minutes, Mike. You can do it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's a little after 9:30, immediately following our budget hearing. At this point in time, we will call the November meeting of the Wood County Board of Supervisors to order. We obviously have an agenda, but one of the things I want to do first is take the opportunity to recognize those veterans. Yesterday was Veterans Day. And normally I don't do this, but I happened to read a real interesting comment the other day, and I thought it was very appropriate. And it goes like this. There's a conference in France where a number of international engineers were taking part, including French, American. During the break, one of the French engineers came back into the room saying, "Have you heard of the latest dumb stunt that the Americans have pulled? They've sent an aircraft carrier to Indonesia. What do they intend to do? Bomb them?" The Boeing engineer stood up and replied quietly, "Our carriers have 3 hospitals on board that can treat several hundred people. They're nuclear powered and can supply emergency electrical power to shore facilities. They have 3 cafeterias with the capacity to feed 3,000 people 3 meals a day. They can produce several thousand gallons of fresh water from the sea each day. They carry half a dozen helicopters for use in transporting victims and the injured to and from the flight deck. We have 11 such ships that aid the world. How many do you have?" And I thought that was pretty appropriate. And with that, I would like, before we go to the invocation, the first thing I'd like to do, and we always rise for the invocation, is have those veterans in the room please rise and be recognized. Because without their commitment, we wouldn't be here at the federal level, the state level, or the courthouses around the country having the ability to have these meetings and to speak. So if I could ask our veterans to please rise. I know we have a number of those members on our county board. Standing, I really, truly, on behalf of all the residents of Wood County, I know we have several different gatherings around town that honor those. Really, truly do want to thank you for your service. And with that, I'd ask the rest of the body to please rise.
Could you correct your microphone? It has a feedback on it.
Our gracious Heavenly Father, as we approach the holiday season, we give our thanks to you for your everlasting mercy and for the gift of freedom. On this, the day after Veterans Day, we thank you for those who have served and continue to serve, and those who gave their lives so that we are able to continue to do the work that is pleasing to you. Be with us today and give us guidance and patience as we consider the business before us. All of this we ask in your name. Amen.
Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think Jerry said we're getting a lot of feedback from this mic.
Better now.
Is that better? Even if I move it a little farther away even? You can hear me out there?
You're going to have a ring again right now.
I'm never sure if that's the microphone or my own ears sometimes. All right, we'll go from here. The clerk has taken the roll. We have gone through the invocation. We have the minutes from the previous meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve, and I have one by Supervisor Nelson and a second by Supervisor Fire. Is there any discussion on those minutes? Okay, all in favor of approval, please signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. Today we have no excusals. We have no resignations. Under appointments, I have one, and that is Marion Hokamp to the South Central Library System for a 3-year term ending December of 2016. I entertain a motion to that effect by Al Warden, a second by, I think, Supervisor Roser had her hand up first. Any discussion on that? All in favor, please signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. And Marion, I want to thank you for agreeing to serve on the South Central Library System Board. Reappointments, we have none today. Brings me to public comment. Is there anybody here from the public who wants to comment on any of the agenda items, anything we have coming before us today or would likely have in the very near future? Any public comment? Okay, cross that off the list. Acknowledgements and recognitions, I have none there either. I'm still hearing a little feedback too. Are you guys catching that out there?
A little bit.
Okay. Special orders of business today. We have a department head annual evaluation template, the process and training, and we're going to do that at the end of the meeting. And what we're trying to do is get some consistency in that evaluation process. And it starts with our board in the evaluation of our department heads. So that's going to take approximately 15 minutes immediately following this meeting. I guess with nothing else, we can head into the packet. We had some referrals, I think there's about 5 of them there. They went to the appropriate people. Typically, that means the Judicial and Legislative Committee, and then out from there. Page 9 of your packet, as we get started, that's the Executive Committee meeting minutes of Tuesday, October 1st. Page 10 and 11, all in the same meeting. Human Resources monthly letter of comments on 12. Maintenance monthly letter of comments on 13. While they're doing that, as you know, we have a fairly major project going on the roof up there. I want to thank the cooperation we've had with Terry Stelzer, working with buildings and maintenance, Sheriff's Department, and everybody else to try to control some of the I don't know, fumes and odors we've had from that process. It's a fairly long process. Page 14, again, was the monthly letter of comments from the Finance Department. 15, a monthly summary from our Systems Department, as well as page 16 and 17. Any questions of systems? Safety and Risk Management on 18. County Clerk's comments on 19. And that brings us to the first of several resolutions that we have today, and I've asked the clerk to please read that one.
This will be Resolution 13-11-1 to amend the 2013 budget for building maintenance, courthouse, and jail for the purpose of funding an unanticipated expenditure. Fiscal note, no additional cost to Wood County. The additional appropriations needed of $60,000 are fully funded by transfers from building maintenance fund balance.
Okay, looking for a motion to that effect by Henkel, a second by Bride. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Any discussion on this resolution? Supervisor Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't quite understand why at this point we would need an architect to tell us what our space needs are. I think the committee and department heads did a super job of putting together our needs assessments and our space needs. What is it that this architect would do at this point that is different than what we already have?
Supervisor Clendenning first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also, I kind of agree with that and would be voting against this. We got a building sitting right over here. I can see it from standing up here. That I believe it's costing us $30,000 a year just to have it empty. I don't see why we can't stick some of this money in this building and make it useful without an architect. The architect is not local. I know the architect is very knowledgeable in this. And we could have gotten somebody locally. And my understanding is this is not just $60,000 to have them tell us these things. It's almost a marriage. They're also involved in the building. They're probably with us for 20 years in this till it's complete. So this is just $60,000, I believe, and then we'll have a retainer. So I am voting against it.
Any other comments on this resolution? Any comments? Okay, if not, please vote.
Fair win.
It worked. That resolution passed unanimously, and if technology doesn't work out great, we can always fix the board up there. We'll go to page 25 in the packet, and 25 is a third resolution brought forth by the Executive Committee, and this one is to amend the budget for the Humane Officer. And as soon as the clerk catches up, I'll let her read that, and we will move forward.
Okay, this is Resolution 13-11-3 to amend the 2013 budget for Humane Officer to fund higher than anticipated expenditures, to transfer $4,000 from available balance in contingency to Humane Officer. At the time of this request, the funds available in contingency are $171,702.
Okay, motion by Alward, second by Clendenning. Any discussion on this one? Any discussion? Please vote. All right, we're going to do this one more time here. We're going to try this on the board one more time if they'll go voice for it. Mr. Pollack and Supervisor Rudy, we're going to need you, Supervisor Moody, need you to vote by voice. The rest of you can vote on the board. Let's try that. And your vote is?
So,
Supervisor Pollack?
Aye.
Supervisor Moody? Your vote is yes still?
Yes.
Okay. Mike's isn't working. All right, that resolution passed unanimously, and I think we ought to be out of here around 2 o'clock. Keep going at this speed. All right, let's try this again. The next two resolutions in your packet are both tax deeding property. Without objection, I would take those two resolutions together. They're on pages 27, 28, 29, 31, and 32. There's two resolutions that are tax deed eligible property by the same ordinance. No objections? Okay.
The first, item 1-4 will be resolution 13-11-4, tax deed eligible property. Authorize the tax deeding of property in compliance with section 75.14 Wisconsin statutes. Fiscal note, taxes 2007 through 2012 of $20,755.99, plus publication fees, special assessments, special charges, and tax deeding expenses for a total of $38,308.15. Item 1-5, which will be numbered resolution 13-11-5, to tax deed eligible property, authorize the tax deeding of property in compliance with section 75.14 Wisconsin statutes. Fiscal note, taxes 2006 through 2012, $5,376.31, plus publication fees and tax deeding expenses for a total of $6,033.31.
Okay, motion to approve the tax deeding of those eligible properties by Supervisor Wagner, second by Supervisor Mahan. Is there any discussion on either of those two resolutions? Any discussion? All right, Supervisor Pollack and Supervisor Moody, you're going to voice vote. The rest of you, please go to the board. Supervisor Pollack and Moody?
Aye.
Aye.
That resolution passed unanimously. And I apologize for the inconvenience to both supervisors, but I guess this is about the only way we're going to get through the meeting. Page 33 of your packet, another resolution from the Executive Committee. It was a busy month last month. This one is to establish the Wood County's tax levy for 2013 and collectible in 2014.
This will be resolution 13-11-6, to establish Wood County's tax levy for 2013, collectible in 2014. Fiscal note, $22,089,009.
And a motion to that effect by Supervisor Hendler, second by Supervisor Fider. Any discussion on this resolution? Any discussion? Please vote. Again, voice vote from the two supervisors who vote. Supervisor Pollack?
Aye.
Supervisor Moody? Both aye. That resolution passed unanimously. Page 35 of your packet, another resolution from the Executive Committee to approve the year 2014 budget.
This will be numbered resolution 13-11-7, to approve the 2014 budget. Fiscal note, uses and sources totaling $92,353,702.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Motion by Bry, second by Elward. Any discussion on this resolution? Supervisor Mahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a small comment here in the area of economic development grants. And my comment is we have basically, in an area where we have basically doubled our budget this year, I would like to make sure that I, for one, will be keeping an eye in particular to our grants to Reggie and the Marshfield Economic Development Board. I realize that the Marshfield Board is a little further along, but I will be watching to make sure we get some bang for our buck on those two items. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the resolution? Any other discussion? Supervisor Wagner?
Okay, one thing actually I've noticed and I wanted to comment on it, I didn't want to comment on it during the hearing, but I wanted to comment on it to the entire board. And one of the things that we've done for years and years and years on this board is, I think we have probably the lowest debt service number of any county in the state, or at least one of them. I mean, we generally don't like to borrow money. I know that I know that borrowing is generally a dirty word, but at some point in time, if we're going to maintain our infrastructure, if we're going to maintain our viability in this county, we're going to have to do that. We're going to have to look at borrowing, and maybe it's not so much in raising taxes, but maybe we can get more bang for the buck by taking the capital outlay that we are doing a levy for and transferring that capital out or that money to debt service to basically get more leverage out of our dollars. And someday I think we're going to have to look at that. We've got a very low rate. You guys have done a great job, but I'm just worried that someday we're going to fall behind on our roads and infrastructure.
Supervisor Meyer?
And those comments are duly noted, and I don't disagree with you at all, Supervisor Wagner. And if there's a strange sight here, during that whole frac stand thing, it was kind of, you never agreed with the highway commissioner at all. And now it's like you're singing Kumbaya and holding hands and waving back and forth, because Doug has been on both the highway committee and on the executive committee that really debt is really a way to move forward with the infrastructure stuff, and we will be taking a hard look at that for the 2015 budget. Yes.
Supervisor Handler? Oh, Supervisor Wagner, I'll let you...
I have no intention of holding hands.
I was waiting for you to say. Supervisor Handler?
Oh, you're such a sweetheart this morning.
In response to my colleague, Mr. Mahan, I am a member of the Marshville Economic Development Board, and one of the things that Mr. Wagner and I have been trying to have people do as well in the city is to give us an application and tell us what you're going to do with the money, and then a follow-up on the end. So I can assure you, Mr. Mahan, we're going to have a follow-up on these reports. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Any other discussion on the resolution? All right, seeing none, please vote. Supervisor Pollak, your vote is?
Aye.
Supervisor Moody, your vote is?
Aye.
Thank you. And that resolution passes unanimously. And I do want to thank everybody from the employees in the departments to the department heads, as Trent did, to the oversight committees. Again, as Supervisor Wagner, no matter how we approach it, we have a very good budget, and we've done a very good job for the taxpayer out there. Page 35A through 30, I don't know, about 5X or something like that, is all the stuff you just voted on. So there's, I don't know, a whole bunch of pages there, probably about 25 of them or 24 of them. Anybody have any questions on those after the fact? Okay. That takes us to page 37 in your packet. Health and Human Services Committee, October 28th. Continues on 39. Additional information on, let's see, 39, 40. Well, actually, let me change that. On 39. Page 40 takes us to the Board of Directors of North Central Community Action Program. That's 40 and 41. Those are two different sets of minutes. The Health Department report from October on 42, 43, 44, 45. Page 46 begins the Wood County Human Services Department report by Director Redder. That's 46, 47, 48. Go to the Norwood update on 49 and 50. Any questions on any of those? Supervisor Roser.
I just wanted to make a statement about the raising of the 1928 part of Edgewater Haven. I don't know how many of you guys heard that we found the cornerstone in that raising. And we're looking to, we're looking to the feasibility of refurbishing that and using it in some way, but it almost brings tears to your eyes when you look at it. It says Wood County Home for the Aged, 1928. And you just think about all the history that came behind that cornerstone. And I know when Amy took me in, I just kind of went, oh my goodness, that is really a big piece of history and our commitment as a county, Home for the Aged. And I hope that you guys understand the nostalgia of that and the historical significance. I think you read in Amy's report about the poor structure of that building, and that it probably would have just been a matter of time before that roof came down. And I think we made a wise decision to move in the direction we did. But that concrete slab weighs 600 pounds. That's the cornerstone that we found in that building. And if you get a chance, I'm sure Amy would be pleased to show it to you, but you just kind of go when you see it, and it just is quite nostalgic.
Thank you, Supervisor. I'm sure we can find a way to preserve that somewhere and make it visible to the public. Veteran Service Officers Report on 51. Report from Edgewater Haven Nursing Home on 52. Some facts and figures on 53. 54 is a blank page. That brings me to 55 in the packet, and that resolution comes from the Health and Human Services Committee.
This will be Resolution 13-11-8 to approve lease agreement with Riverview Hospital Association. Fiscal note, annual lease cost is $95,946, funded as follows. Public health tax levy, $70,917. WIC grant, $16,801. Other grants, $5,092. Healthy Smiles, $3,137. Future annual lease costs based on consumer price index and likely to be similar as above, but unknown at this time.
For the reading of the resolution, I have a motion by Hendler, a second by Hokamp. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Supervisor Ware?
I took a look at the termination clause in this lease, and I also looked at the section directly above it, which is entitled Term of Lease. It's still a 15-year lease, and the only way it appears, and unless Mr. Kasperholz would like to correct me, it appears that the only time we can opt out of it is at the end of each 5-year period. I think that's what it says. In addition to that, there's nothing in there that says that they're going to come back to the county board and renew that, and get permission to renew that lease from the county board or discuss it with the county board, even at the end of that lease. The initial term of the lease is still 15 years. There's not much change in this. For that reason, I'm voting against this.
Supervisor Clendenny and Supervisor Lynch.
I also am voting against it. In looking at it, I thought 2019 probably was the only out in it. Maybe I misread it wrong, but I don't think there's any change in it. And I think we should, since it passed, let the architects figure it out. But I don't think we should have a 15-year lease.
Supervisor Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with both the gentlemen that just spoke about the termination, but I have several other concerns along with that. If we go back to a little history, in 2011, we were renting the annex from ourselves over here at 5,400 square feet. Then we went to the new contract at the hospital at 7,547, about a 2,000 square foot increase. This contract is also an increase in square footage. We're going to pick up an additional 318 square footage for offices, plus another lounge area of 470. Plus, if you compare the old contract to the new contract, we're getting hit with an increase in the square footage rate in both the main area and the offices. And by the way, if you look at the numbers in this contract, they don't come out. Let me find the page. Well, it's on page 57 here. If you look at the numbers here, it says 7,648.56 at the square footage at 17 times 1221. If I calculated that correctly, that comes out to $9,000. There's a mix-up in these numbers, and the same goes for the square footage for the lounge area. concern I have is that we're paying some of this rent with grant money. I'm not so sure that that's legal. If you get grant money, I would assume that we should be using that for the benefit of the constituents rather than paying rent. Another statement, if you look at the third whereas, it says that the needs implementation committee recommended that they negotiate a new contract. I've been through this base needs book several times. I can't locate that comment. I don't think that's true, unless I missed it. The other thing that should be considered, along with this base needs, instead of renting from an outside party, would we not be better off to consider building? I think this was a bad decision to do what we did in 2011, a bad business decision. This only makes it worse. Thank you.
Supervisor Hadley.
Thank you very much. You know, at the last month, we talked about similar issues like this, and I didn't say anything. But this time, I'm almost forced to say it, that number one, being part of the Health and Human Services Committee, I think in the last 6 to 8 years, it's been quite a journey. But one thing I discovered that our health department is one of the premier health departments in not only in the country, but also in the state, simply by the acclimates they've received over the past few years. And this particular location is ideal for them because it has certain amenities that blend in with the entire mission of that department. And I think what we need to do is get past some more idiosyncrasies, language in a legal document, or what they do during the course of a year. I think this is one of the best opportunities this county has. We talked about space in a space utilization committee. The price tag on a facility to accommodate not only the health department, but also the human services department will be a price sticker that no one on this particular board will entertain. I think the figure was thrown out about 30 million for a fine building out by the highway department. You know, we don't want to spend money on one hand, and now we're arguing about services that we provide. This is ridiculous. I think we ought to support our departments, our citizens of this community, our taxpayers. We're getting a good bang all the way around. Thank you.
Supervisor Alger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't like to chew the cabbage twice here, but back on one of the questions about the implementation committee, excuse me, there was something said about us not looking at the health department, not including the health department. But at one of those meetings, I believe it was Kathy Elf, one of the members of the health department, we asked her about this document we had and this lease agreement we had with Riverview. And are we going to be left out in the cold in the near future, or is this, what is the thing, what is over there, what's happening? So we had asked her to go over there and look it over, and that's how this all derived. Because we were worried about, well, if we get this all done, and Riverview says, well, you can't stay here anymore, where are we going to put them? Back in the annex? The annex looks beautiful when you drive by. The exterior looks just absolutely beautiful. You walk into the waiting room, and that's really nice, although it's so small that when they bring their little children in there and the door opens up, you get a cold blast of air. Once you go out of the waiting room, you're stepping back into 1856 because it's a dump. The thing is a dump. What should be done is it should be, don't cost any more money. Tear it down. Get rid of it. Nobody would ever rent it. Nobody would ever buy it. Once they got past the waiting room, and I think the health department did a wonderful job, and we have one of the greatest health departments of any county in the state of Wisconsin, as far as that goes in the United States. People look to our health department and follow our leads. I I think I go along with Mr. Hendler. I think we should quit quibbling about this and do something right. We did something right for the people that are disabled. They can't get in over here, they can't park here. They can get in over there and do a nice job, and that's what we're supposed to do. They save the constituents' money. That's our job. Thank you very much.
Any other discussion on the resolution? Supervisor Curry, Supervisor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listen to all the comments. I've been in over at the hospital. I think it's a great facility. This is going to be kind of a political comment here, but I guess my issue here, and I understand that we, on the Space Implementation Committee, and I sit on that committee, but we just expended $60,000 to look at what's going on. It's very possible, I don't deny, that they're going to come back and say, that's the best place to be, it's the most efficient, it's the most cost effective. But to me, it seems like we're putting the cart before the horse again here. We're spending money, we're going to come up with a study. Hopefully, my hope is that study is going to give us a direction for the county in the future. It very well be that we're going to stay in the hospital, but I think it's not prudent to commit ourselves to a long-term lease when, on the other hand, we're looking at what we're going to do with county facilities. And it's only a few months that I believe we should have a report back from that engineer on not just what to do with the health department, or it's what the county should do. Now, at that point, we could move or not move in the direction that report gives, but I think it's imprudent to act right now on a long-term lease. Thank you.
Supervisor Rosen.
I just wanted to answer some of the questions that Supervisor Wentz brought up. We have always used part of grant monies for some administration and rent, so that is nothing new. And I think if you look at other departments across the county, they also are able to use some grant dollars for rent. You know, I have to commend the maintenance department because they sliced and diced that courthouse annex for quite a long time to get as much use out of that. But I don't think anybody would want the health department to move back into those facilities. Those of you that are having questions about the health department, and I won't get you to raise your hands, but have you ever been to the square footage that the health department is currently renting? I think that you will find that that is being used very cost effectively and efficiently. There was a long list of pros included in your packet about why it's advantageous. Now, Mr. Curry makes an excellent point. We are going to hire this architectural firm to help us with some strategic planning. It's going to be long-term strategic planning. We can open this in 2019, and I guarantee you, if in 2014 a decision is made to borrow money and invest in the infrastructure, we're not going to have those things up before 2019, and then we have an opening for the health department to get out of that facility, and perhaps, if that is the recommendation, to move back onto the courthouse campus. So we do have that opener in 5 years, and then again in 2014, and we can always, without cause, get out of this. The other thing I'd like to just let Mr. Winch know is he's not going to find that request in that blue book that he's looking at, because that request did not come from the 2012 Space Needs Committee. That request came from the 2013 Space Needs Implementation Committee, and he'll find that request in the minutes from those committee minutes. So I guess that's all I need to say. We're looking to this architectural firm to help us make some good long-term recommendations. So I appreciate the support for that expense, and I believe that we are doing the best thing by the health department. And if that architectural firm comes back and says, The Riverside Hospital is not a good place for the health department. We need to incorporate them in a strategic plan to bring them back on campus. We have that opportunity to do that as we move forward.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? All right, I'd ask you to please vote. Supervisor Pollak, your vote is? No. Supervisor Moody, your vote is?
Yes.
There we go. That resolution passed 13-6. 13-6. Thank you. The pages 57 to 70 are the agreement that Supervisor Wagner was referring to, so you can set those aside. Page 71 of your packet, minutes of the Wood County Public Safety Committee of October 14th, that's 71. 72, page 73, and 4. The Humane Officers Report on 75 and 76. The monthly activity report from the coroner on 77. Jail population and other facts and figures on 78 through 84. 78 through 84. Any questions on any of those from the public safety minutes? Okay. Minutes of the Judicial and Legislative Committee of October 15th on 85. From October 16th on 86 and 87. From November 4th on 88. Supervisor Clendenning and Supervisor Ashbeck to follow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the item number 2 here on November 4th, page 88, in concerns with draft number 2, I did my best to send this out to all the committee chairs, to department heads for their review. And we had some department heads at the meeting, but not as many as I would have liked to have. I think before we really come up with a county board rule concerning this draft number 2, I would like the committee to basically, if nothing else at our next meeting, but I think it should be a special meeting, to sit down with department heads, the committee, and committee chairs, and go over this. I don't like the backbiting that's kind of going on about this and why it came to us. So I would just like to think about that and maybe set up a special meeting.
So, I think you could probably squeeze it into a regular meeting too. I think, as I attended that meeting, there will be further discussion. It probably sets us down a course though where we have some stability going forward. I think it makes sense to have input from department heads, supervisors, and everyone else involved. It's nothing we need to rush to, but we need to look at it. That's page 89, by the way. Page 90, the child support enforcement monthly letter of comments. Oh, I'm sorry. Supervisor Ashbeck. Bob, I saw you before I went on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a problem with that on line number 2 because it says we just put up some lots of that for sheriff's sale, and according to this, I couldn't get involved with any of these parcels. I got one in the village of Milder. I couldn't go back and negotiate on that because I'd have to come to the county board before I could.
Supervisor, it's a little difficult. We're talking, this specifically deals with acquisition, not sale. And I think your comment deals with the sale of lots, not the acquisition of lots. So they're kind of, we already have a policy that deals with sale. Supervisor Mahan, did you have a question or comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was I was disappointed to see that judicial and legislative, did not take up the item of compensation for county board supervisors. I don't think it is inappropriate whatsoever. We have just given a majority of our employees a raise. We have given 2 of our elected officials significant raises. If you look at other counties the size of Wood County, we are woefully behind. I think that it is not inappropriate whatsoever. I think if nothing else, it may, or it may not, Mr. Minor and I had this discussion previous, stimulate some competition in the races, if nothing else. But I think there is no harm in taking a look at it. Thank you.
Supervisor Clendon?
Yes, I'd like to also comment on that. I think it should have been looked at better with the committee, and I don't think there was any consideration. I think it becomes a supplement to people that are on Social Security, for crying out loud. People who are working, you know, aren't going to take the day off and get $40 for a day off. I know you don't get in here for the money, but I used to work for the paper mill in town, and I was on the county board, and at that time we got $11. How about that? And of course, our daily pay was 80-some bucks, but you know, I had to take some days off and go to a county board meeting. And I just like the competition out there. There's a lot of younger people who are working, would love to serve the community in this capacity, but they can't. You can't take a day off. And I just think it's a supplement to Social Security, what we're getting.
Supervisor Wagner?
I want to bring up one other thing that we did discuss. We did pay some. I think we paid more attention to it than the compensation for the supervisors themselves, and that was the compensation for the county board chair. We've got one of the lowest paid county board chairs like anywhere, and you know, I think Lance's mantra has always been work cheap, and he does.
You get what you pay for.
But the truth of the matter is, I think, you know, sometimes I think we are missing an opportunity because we can only do this prior to the circulation of papers, if I understand it. And it may be too late. I think we already passed the budget, so we can't do this again for another 2 years. But somewhere within the next year or so, one of our committees should take a look at this compensation and come up with a recommendation from the board, at least for the position of chairman, and possibly for looking at the supervisors. I don't know if raising I don't know if we could raise the salary enough to accomplish what either Mr. Clendenning or Mr. Mahon recommended. Unless we cut it down to a county commission of 5 people and raise them make it full time, they might be able to do that. But I don't know if we're ever going to be able to raise it enough to encourage people to run for it and get a full-time job. So, but I do think we need to look at it during the next year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One last comment. Total compensation for county board supervisors. The grand total is less, probably, I'm sure it's less, than probably our top 2 officials in the courthouse. And I would have to concur that if nothing else, our board chairman is woefully uncompensated for what he does. Thank you.
As the youngest person on this board, and have been for the 10 years I've been on this board, and who pays into Social Security well, let's see, how many of you guys are on Social Security? There's very few of us full-time working that are putting into Social Security for you people. I don't know that you could raise it up, and Doug and I have a disagreement about this. I don't think that even if you do raise it, the voter apathy is such out there that, I mean, look at our town boards. I make more per diem wise than I think probably Bill and Al and all of us that serve on town boards, maybe even on the city council, all of us that serve make more on our town boards than we do on the county board in the per diem aspect. You can't raise it up. The voter apathy is out there such that you're never going to get the younger people to. I mean, I'm still one of the youngest town chairmen in Wood County, and I've been a town chairman for 20-some years. I mean, good grief. I just don't see, if a young person wanted to get involved, you'd see more, I think, races in the town elections, the city council elections. I'm sorry, there's a lot of Social Security recipients serving on those boards as well. You just don't see that competition out there where they could take part. So, thank you.
Supervisor Nelson.
Well, the only comment I can make on this is the fact that, yes, we need new blood in the turnover, and the only answer I think is there is not compensation, but term limits. We have term limits, then they're forced to change people. And maybe, but again, the young people aren't interested, which is a shame.
Sounds like the judicial and legislative committee had a plate going forward.
They missed their opportunity.
Any other comments on their minutes? Any other comments on their minutes? Okay, then, I don't even remember where I was. We got to child support, and then we were to corp counsel's monthly report to his committee, matters of litigation and of interest, several or more notice of injury and claims, 92, 93, and 94. The Aging Disability Resource Center minutes from September 12th on 95, 96, and 97. Their minutes from the Finance Committee on 98. The Central Wisconsin State Fair Board minutes on 99, 100, 101, Supervisor Ashbeck, and 102.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you look on page 100, these are the September minutes, but they have been changed in October. You look under the grounds and the safety, there's a comment by Dennis Strutz at the end of the paragraph. I write it. We have that eliminated. We're going to use the word of view of all people instead of what is stated in there. So, because I thought that was kind of a harsh statement you put in there.
What page is that on?
Okay.
101.
See what you're saying. The committee can handle that. Forward and along. County of the Library Board, County Library Board, July 25th on 103. Page 105, South Central Library System Board of Trustees. That's 105 and 106. The McMillan Memorial Library Board of Trustees, 107 and 108. The Space Needs Study Implementation Committee meeting minutes of September 23rd and 109. And their meeting from October 21st on 110. Any questions there? Okay, that takes us to the end of the packet, but it brings us to our special order of business. So if Peter Manley is going to run that process. Most of you out there have had the opportunity over time to work with Peter on a project or more, and Peter's the guy I always refer to, and I really mean this, usually you're being smart enough when you say it, but the guy who knows something about everything. And so we ask him to lead this discussion also. So Peter, the floor is yours. Do it the way you like.
Thank you, Lance. Good morning, everyone. We're going to look at a new, is that better?
Wait, that's me.
Okay. We're figuring out which button to push. Or the mic up here. There we go. We're going to do a short training, and I've got this down to 15 minutes, on the new evaluation process. This is the new evaluation form for supervisors, and it's more than informational for you. It affects you directly in that you will begin using this form for department heads. So county board supervisors evaluate department heads. And I should state at the start that for the upcoming year, we have a bit of a transition for evaluating the performance in 2013 of the department heads. You'll be using the old form, but going forward, you'll be using this new form that we'll be presenting to you today. We'll go over the basic parts of this evaluation form, and I'll kind of talk about them a little bit, and then I'll use the actual form and we'll kind of run through an example for you to see how you use it. The three main parts of the evaluation form are core criteria, selected criteria, and then goals, and we'll talk about each one of those. This new form is a little bit different. We always used to, in the past, we had one form that we used that we looked at the end of the year. The new form, we begin the year by setting up some expectations, and so that both the committee and the department head have a better understanding of what the expectations are for the upcoming year of 2014. And you'll have to decide along with the department head which core criteria are important, and you have 40 points to distribute between those. Then there's also a variety of other or selected criteria that you have 30 points to distribute, and what are the upcoming goals. Core criteria you have a choice. Those are on page 2, and we'll kind of go into this in more detail, but your core criteria on page 2 are 6 core criteria, and you have 40 points that you distribute between them. Then the next 3 pages are the selected criteria, and for the selected criteria, you assign 30 points between 3 to 6 of the selected criteria that you select. We've got 16 selected criteria written down, but you can even you can self-define your own selected criteria up to 3 of those, and give those away. This kind of the response on the Pay for Performance Ad Hoc Committee, what this does is it allows the evaluation form to fit more directly into what the job responsibilities and duties of the supervisor are, so that the evaluation can be more applicable. Lastly, you'll set goals. You need to select set 1 to 3 goals for the upcoming year, and you can assign 30 points between those. We also suggest that the goals be SMART goals. And what do SMART goals mean? Specific, measurable, achievable, and a realistic time frame. So what I'd like to do now is just kind of run through a quick example of what you should be doing at the start in December of this coming year or January, of setting up the evaluation form, the expectations for the upcoming year. So we have, for the new form that you would be using, we would be setting it up for the evaluation year of 2014. And we'll see how good my typing skills are in front of the whole county board. We've got a new employee, and just for the fun of it, we're going to say that you have decided quickly to implement a county executive position.
That may be a poor choice.
And you don't think Bucky Badger would be a good county executive? And we'll put him in the county clerk's office. This is an annual evaluation. So it's just filling out the top part of that first page to get the basic information down. The bottom part of that first page you won't fill out until the end of the year when the evaluation is done. If you look at the second page, that's when at the start of the year you'll assign weights. You remember you have 40 points between those 6 different core criteria, and you have to assign weights for that, for Bucky Badger. And in assigning weights, let's say that the first 2, we give them 5 points. The next 2 we feel are for the county executive position are a little bit more important. And notice that there's 2 warning signs down at the bottom. The core criteria weights in total must equal 40, and you have to give a weight of at least 1 to each of the 6 criteria. So once we click on that and it does add up to 40, those warning signs go off. You have the option, you can do this online or on the Excel form if you want to, or you can just do it kind of the old-fashioned way, hard copy if you want to, and do it with a pen on a hard copy. And then if you look at the next 3 pages, that was the core criteria, and you have to give a weight to each of those. And then if you look at the next 3 pages, it's looking at the selected criteria, and this would probably be done in conjunction with the department head. They might make a proposal, but there should be agreement between the committee and the department head on what's important for that department head in the upcoming year. So we'll say that you think that employee development and compliance with regulations are important. And let's say that you self-define a political hobnobbing as one of his functions. And notice when we put all of those points in, the selected criteria must equal 30 points. Warning goes off at the bottom. So that's just as a signal that you've got 30 points, and all you've done at this point is say, these are the things that that you should be paying attention to in the next year, and that's what you're going to be evaluated on at the end of the year. And then we have been doing this, and this is a little bit more formalized on the goals, setting up goals, and remember SMART goals. And I'll just quickly write down a few goals that barely meet the SMART designation. The first was to develop a budget. I'm sorry, that's should be a space in there. Develop a budget that satisfies Mike Martin, and develop that by the usual deadlines. Develop a. Good luck. Oh, it gets harder. Karen didn't know she had so much power. Develop a budget that receives positive remarks from the local media. And some employee development expectations. And notice that the first part, once we click off of that third one, the first line of the goal setting automatically goes down below, and you also have 30 points that you have to give for weights between the 3 different goals. So you've given 30 weight points. At that point, the county executive knows what the committee expects as far as expectations, and knows what they'll be evaluated on at the end of the year. So that's what you would do at the start of the year, and so that document is just sitting out there as far as expectations. You can save that form at the beginning of the year as a computer file, or you can save it as a hard copy, and then that'll be on hand throughout the year and at the end of the year for the end of the year evaluation. To evaluate performance at the end of the year, you would evaluate the performance on the core criteria, and then you'd go to the selected criteria that you'd given a weight to and evaluate it. And if any of the performance items are below satisfactory, like in the past, you have to write down some comments on why their performance is below satisfactory, and then you evaluate the performance on goals. And then there's also some sections that are similar to the previous evaluation form on the last page for additional comments, for improvement, or for employee development that you can fill out. Then you obtain the usual signatures, and then you need to turn in a hard copy to Human Resources. And they need a hard copy because they need the signatures on that. So just real quickly, I'll kind of run through on how that could be done. We go to the core criteria for Bucky Badger. And you'll notice at the top of, if you're on the second page, if you notice at the top, it's split into 10 different categories that you can evaluate them on, but then those are also kind of split into 5 categories that are the same as what we had previously in our evaluations. And under this system, no, you can't put an X on the middle of the line. Like a lot of evaluations got turned in before. You have to choose one or the other. You've got 10 different choices. So you can just put an X down in how you think Bucky Badger did those. If you make a mistake and do something else, well, you shouldn't do that, so you should do it. So you put an X in each category. And the points automatically add up. You can see that the points add up, the core criteria points for this section. Out of the 40 points, Bucky Badger came up with 27 points, and you can see that they all automatically go to the total point category on the front of the page. After you've done the core criteria, then you just go to the selected, you go to the selected criteria and do the evaluations in that section again.
So Peter, this will only add up in the appropriate if you do it electronically?
If you do it by hand, you would have to calculate it by hand. If for some reason you,
I mean, that's just a benefit of doing it electronically, is
Right.
that, you know, so.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Try to do it electronically.
If for some reason you, or by mistake, or you just wanted to evaluate Bucky Badger on some criteria that you didn't give any weight to, you can do that, but you won't get any points out of it. So it could be done just kind of on an information basis, or maybe you just made a mistake and put in that where you didn't really want to. I'm not sure how to get this screen full enough to show the criteria. But this here is employee development, compliance with regulations, and let's say that he is below satisfactory, and some HIPAA issues arose during the year, and for some reason Bucky Badger was in charge of that, and so that's why he came out below a satisfactory level. So once you have done all of the selected criteria, again, on the 30 points possible, he came up with 17.5 points. And then you would go down to the goals, and there's a section under each of the goals where you would write comments on how the department had performed on those goals. We really left this up to your subjective decision, because a lot of times, especially if you set tough goals, stuff happens during the year that maybe the goal was easy to reach, or maybe things happened that made the goal impossible to reach. So you have to take that into consideration also. So we kind of left that fairly subjective and open to a lot of discussion from the committee on how to assign those goals. And you can assign up to the points, the weight points that you added, and so let's say you assign that, not those number of points on the goals between the 30 possible points. Bucky Badger gained 27 points, and you can see that Bucky had 79 points out of a possible 100 points on his overall evaluation. Again, on the very last page, we have the usual comments where you can make additional comments, or the employee can make additional comments, any planned employee development and training, and if needed, a performance improvement plan, especially if they're scored below satisfactory on anything. And then you would go up to the first page and get the signatures that were required, and turn a hard copy into the HR department. And that process is the same as it's done, as it's been done for the past umpteen years. And then we also put a reminder in there that once, at the end of 2014, once you've evaluated them on that, you also have to start a new form for 2015. Now, we don't really expect that the weights are going to change a lot from year to year. So the weights would probably be the same, but you have the opportunity to change those and adjust them if you want. And then you also have to set up new goals for the upcoming year. So at that evaluation time, you evaluate the previous year, and then you set up expectations for the upcoming year. So that's the end of the quick process on the evaluation. I've handed out a sample evaluation form, the instructions, and then also the definitions along with it. And my expectation is that for most committees, and committees handle this differently with different department heads, but for a lot of times it'll be a discussion and a proposal from the department head, but the committee and the department head need some agreement. The committee has final say on setting the weights and the goals and those kinds of things. So with that, I know Ed has a couple of comments on things that he's experienced with evaluations, and you've probably heard some of it before, and then we'll also take questions.
And while that's coming up here, you've heard Professor Manley will pass out the test here in a minute. You have 60 minutes to complete that. If you don't get at least 70%, you know, it's going to be tough sledding. So this is going to be a long process, and as Ed starts, you know, one of the things I'm talking about, this is an ever-evolving process. You know, one of the things that the Local Government Institute, the Wisconsin Center for Performance Excellence, have done is really looked into this process, and I'm not saying exactly the same form, but they looked at all the companies across the state that basically use this type of criteria, and on average, they've seen about a 30% increase in productivity from companies that have based it on some performance similar to this, and profitability was up almost 50% in some of the leadership groups they had out there. So I think we're moving in the right direction. It's certainly a lot better than what we had, and we will continue to evolve. So Ed, why don't you wrap it then?
Okay, I'm not going to take 15 minutes. I just got a couple of quick points. first off, as you're doing this, and you're going to be doing the reviews for department heads, try and separate how the overall department is performing from how the department head performs, because there can be a difference. So look at the skills that the department head has, how the criteria are met, and sometimes you're going to find that the department may do really well or not so well, but that doesn't necessarily reflect the department head's rating. The next point is I want to talk about how to rate people. We used to have a tendency in Wood County to say that department heads are all superstars. And we've got some numbers that show that 5-10 years ago, a lot of our department heads, hopefully you can hear me, but a lot of our department heads were scoring up in this area. I couldn't find a pointer here, so. Oh, do we have one? Oh, thank you. I'll try not to aim it at anybody. Okay. A lot of our department heads were scoring way up high. And that's a nice rating, and it's good for their egos, and it makes you feel good about giving it, but it doesn't necessarily always reflect it. We tracked that number, and up until last year, the average department head rating had come down probably to a more realistic level. This last year we saw it move up again by about 0.5 point. I don't quite know why, but the point I want to make is that if a person is doing a good job, they're meeting your expectations, things are running reasonably pretty well, their rating should fall in the middle of the graph. You're talking down in the satisfactory to the satisfactory plus range. There's always a hesitancy to say, well, they're satisfactory, because we think that that is a negative term. A department head or any other employee who is meeting the expectations of the job is satisfactory. If they consistently go above that, then fine, let's give them some higher ratings. But you've got to be honest with your people on what you're expecting and how they're doing. Actually, 70% of our employees should rate right in that 4 to 7 range. Right now, it's still, they're rating up about 7.5, but they should be in the 4, which means they could improve a little bit to 7, means they're doing consistently a little better than satisfactory. The third point and last point is that as you're rating them, there is a tendency also, if they're really good on one point, to have a halo effect and then give them high ratings on each of the other criteria. This review form is quite different than in the past, that you're looking at very specific skills or traits, and they may be really good in one area and not so good in another. And you have to remember to do your rating on the trait, not the overall person. So, Peter, I'm going to turn it back. Thank you for this.
We'll take any questions. I'd also like to thank we had a committee of department heads that kind of worked on this process and really did a lot of work on it, and also the system staff has been very helpful in kind of setting up this form. And we're still kind of testing and working out little bugs, but so far it's going well. Any questions?
Trent.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you to Peter for spearheading this group and to the subcommittee that came up with this form. I do think it's a much better form. And I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Ed said too. Please pay attention to those definitions across the top. If there's one improvement or one thing I would change on this form, Peter and Ed, is the titles on top. The unsatisfactory, requires improvement, satisfactory, exceeds standards, exceptional. I don't know, I just don't care for those headings. I mean, you're already setting it up into a mindset that satisfactory and bad. To me, those things should be gone. Ed probably doesn't agree with me, but I can too. I just don't like those headings. I just think we're already assigning how good the employee is just by those headings, and it should be based on those definitions below.
We'll put you on the
Yeah,
next
so see, you're this
subcommittee.
close to getting appointed to another committee.
Yeah, never mind, it's beautiful, thank you. But no, please pay attention to those and understand that if you're rating your, I caution you, if you're rating your department heads at exceeds all the time, then you're not expecting enough out of them. If they're exceeding your expectations consistently and always, and all your department heads are exceeding your expectations, then folks, you're not expecting enough out of your department heads. I leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Wagner first, and then Supervisor Curry.
Just a quick one, there are a couple of really nasty black holes in human resources, and one of them is employee compensation, and the other one's evaluation. You're a brave man for tackling this, and I think this is a job well done. Thank you.
Supervisor Curry.
Yeah, this evaluation, are we planning on affecting supervisors' wages with it?
They don't get evaluated.
I'll let Ed respond to that.
Don't know if I turned that off or not. Following the dictates of the subcommittee, yes. It would be used in merit cases, but it would also, following, again, the dictates of the subcommittee, if they did not get a satisfactory review, did not get a step increase.
I've got a follow-up then.
Supervisor Curry.
What weight in the process does this evaluation form have, or is there other criteria that's going to be used for is this 100%, or is there other parts of the evaluation that are going to be used?
Could everybody hear that?
I can get up and, I guess, so this pot potentially could be used to affect wages for supervisors, compensation. So what weight does this have, or is there other criteria that's going to be used to establish that?
This
Thank you.
is the only criteria to establish that.
Okay, so this evaluation is going to be 100%.
Right.
For whatever increases in
Right.
wages.
And there is a appeal process.
But our responsibility is just in the evaluation of department heads.
Correct.
Right.
And then in departments and every supervisor will be using this form because they're on the pay for performance system. And every supervisor will be rated by the supervisor above them or the department head, except department heads are rated by the committee.
Trent, I'm not sure I'm answering the question you're asking directly. Go ahead.
I probably won't either, but if I'm understanding correctly, we actually have a few years to play with this because I think there are very, very few people that are in that merit from that 112.5% to the 120%. Most of them are in steps. There's 3 Ed?
3 years.
3 years before we see any, so there's room to play with this and to adjust it as needed, which is kind of a good thing, I guess, at this point.
Did you have a follow-up, Supervisor Curry, or did that answer your question or not?
It answers it, I guess. I understand it's not going to be immediate, but it isn't a concern is whether this is going to, whether there's other parts, other criteria in this process, and it appears there isn't. Evaluation is the trigger for the increases.
Yeah, especially when you set the goals, I think that's where the tire meets the road as far as county board supervisors versus department heads is setting those goals so that everybody has an understanding of what those goals are. So yes, I mean, I think that's where our say in the whole process comes in, is setting those goals.
Supervisor Roser?
So is this the same form that department heads will then use to evaluate their supervisors, and supervisors will use to evaluate the employees under them?
Only supervisors.
Only supervisors.
Non-supervisory employees are still using the same evaluation form that we used in the past, although that might be adjusted in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure that will evolve as we go also. Any other questions? So we're early in this process. We wanted to give you a quick overview of how this is going to happen, and to echo a little bit of what Mr. Reed said is, you know, when we're all done, we really should have a bell curve, and we have had certain departments at times that have skewed the entire process by having everybody rated perfect, which is pretty much impossible if you really think about it. So think about it, do your due diligence. Is there anything else that needs to come before the board today? Anything else? Next meeting, December 17th. We'll see you there. I need a motion to adjourn. Is that a motion, Supervisor Nelson? Motion by Supervisor Nelson, second by Supervisor Mooney. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned.